Did the Dallas Cowboys find their starting left guard in undrafted free agency? All that more this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Today, we are breaking down two undrafted free agent offensive linemen the Cowboys brought in after the draft. Gotta say, Landon, I like both these guys quite a bit.
I mean, so far, it's an incredible class. I mean, there's no way around it. You've gotten a couple of different guys who I feel like that could, come in. We've talked about a couple of different guys who they've signed that could come in and have a role right away on the team. And now we've got these two guys who get injected into a position where, you have kind of some starters, obviously at the top. You have kind of an idea of where you want of what you want in the starting five. But I think that these guys can come in and kind of really kind of upset the apple cart at the bottom half of the roster. And one of these guys, like you mentioned, if things kind of fell right for him and develops, maybe in the mix for getting some playing time in the regular season. So this is an exciting group.
Yeah, all right, let's just stop teasing and actually get into the players because it's a lot of fun. Let's start with TJ Bass, an offensive tackle who was from Oregon. We're gonna talk about another guy that's maybe more highly thought of in the pre-draft process, but gotta say, TJ Bass is a pretty good player.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I to me, this seems like a situation where this. I'm surprised he honestly didn't get drafted.
Yeah.
I think that if it feels like, there is a clear path to. This guy just reads totally like a tackle that should be moved to guard. I mean, he's just like his skill set. You watch the tape, his strengths and weaknesses. They just seem to line up with a guy that probably should have been playing guard. I think it's one of those situations where in college you're the best offensive lineman on your team, so they're going to put you at left tackle. But you just watch his game. He's strong. He can move a little bit. He's a little bit shorter on the arm side, but that doesn't matter as much when you're talking about being inside. I think, where I saw him really struggle are in the things that, kind of that offensive tackles have to do. He's not a reactive athlete. And I think that's what we're going to need to see him kind of overcome. We talked about this kind of reactive athleticism when we talk about defenders a lot, right? Like, it's important to be athletic. It's important to be able to run in a straight line. It's important to be able to change direction. But what's really, truly important on defense and then on offensive line, I think, especially when you're talking about pass protection, is that you're able to process information that's happening in front of you quickly and then have your feet coordinate with that. And I think that's where Bass has struggled at times, is that, when he's left on an island or left isolated on the left side, in space, he can't change direction. He can't redirect when a guy makes a quick move inside. He doesn't mirror well. And I think these are all things that really kind of, showed itself out as a problem. Now, a tackle, I think you move him inside where there's less room for him to have to travel. You try to isolate whether this issue is an agility problem or is it a processing what you're seeing problem, right? And I think either one of them are workable. But if you get this guy kind of, with a little bit better pass protection, a little bit better feet, he's got power already. Like we've talked about, he can move bodies. Despite what I just said, he's not a bad foot athlete necessarily. Like if you're running wide zone, he can get to the second level and hit a target, and he can do all that stuff. I think where he struggles is when he is having to react to a defender and kind of mirror that defender.
Sure.
And that's why he really, kind of was exasperated when he was playing left tackle against pass rushers. And that, I think otherwise, this guy has ready-made NFL strength. I think he can come in and at least be part of the mix. I don't know if he's taking a starting job from anyone, but I think it's more than what I would normally expect from an undrafted free agent guard.
So a couple of things. The other offensive lineman that we're going to talk about today is Earl Bostick Jr. from Kansas, who is a traits-based player, right? Like you are signing him and investing in him because of the athletic traits. TJ Bass just doesn't have those same athletic traits. By the way, I thought it was funny at the combine. His arm length was 32 3/8. At his pro day, it was 31 7/8. Somehow his arm shrank.
Wow. These guys, they really struggle where the arms, like, it's
that's
always
exactly
like
what it is, right?
The
Is
arm length is shorter, but the wing length is longer, right?
Yeah.
It's like they can't figure out where the shoulder begins. It's crazy.
So that part of it's weird. But the one thing I'll say about Bass is it's not like he was a average player at Oregon. Like he played 34 starts in college. In 2021, he was first team All Pac-12 at left tackle. Last year, he was second team All-American, first team All Pac-12 at left tackle. So like this is somebody who was highly thought of in the Pac-12. It's just you have questions about, does his athleticism translate to the NFL? But if you're going from left tackle to guard in the NFL, I don't think it's as concerning for me.
Yeah, I mean, there is some other stuff about his game that, he plays, and this is probably, due to the length, he plays a little too belly to belly at times. You've seen these kind of guys where they get into the body of the defender, and that's not always good habits, especially in the NFL, because defenders are so much more athletic than you are at the NFL level. And that difference between offensive lineman athleticism and defensive lineman athleticism that gap only gets wider in the NFL. So there are definitely some technique things to work on, but he comes in with a very high floor. Like, I think he's got solid technique, for what he's doing. You just need him to kind of unlock a little bit more of the kind of foot quickness inside. And I think, putting him in a guard, look, things happen quicker inside a guard. Like, so I understand that that's not a good solution necessarily for any quickness, but I think there is less severity as to how far he's being asked to move off his spot and then move back.
Yes.
And I think that's really where he has issues. You see him kind of get into that trap that left tackles or tackles in general get into, where they overset. Oh no, then now I'm beat inside. And now I'm thinking about being beat inside. I'm trying to have a strong post step and I'm not getting outside quick enough. It felt like he was constantly getting caught in that, where if he didn't have a very specific plan before to get out of his stance, he could be beat by quicker defensive linemen. I don't know that will be as much of an issue, because he just won't have as much space when he's playing inside a guard.
I've got one incredibly awesome stat about TJ Bass, and then an NFL comparison I want your thoughts on when we get back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You should be betting on the Lakers right now. That's a very, very profitable bet, Landon. I know you're a huge basketball fan. So
is basketball still happening?
Yeah. Well, there you go. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. We've got the Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals starting this week. Make sure you're watching that. Lakers Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, Landon and I are going to talk about 2 undrafted free agent receivers that the Cowboys brought in, including somebody that I believe is the best undrafted free agent receiver the Cowboys have signed since Cole Beasley.
Wow.
Make sure you guys are tuning in for that. First, a stat on TJ Bass, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. Bass is the #1 graded zone blocking offensive lineman in college football over the last 2 years. He had a 93.6 run blocking grade on zone runs and it wasn't even close between him and the next place guy. So I thought that was really interesting that he was that good on zone runs in college.
That is really interesting. I mean, look, it's a definitely a skill set. It's something you have to learn. Footwork, the kind of concentration, the hand placement. I mean, again, that's the interesting thing about athleticism, right? Because that you see this guy, and the implication is that he's not an incredible athlete, but the truth of the matter is that, like, when you see him on the hoof, like getting to the second level, he does that stuff really well.
He
He
gets
hits
the
his
spot he
targets
needs
really
to,
well.
right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that shows you kind of the like what can be accomplished with technique. With
Yes.
good technique and solid technique is that when you have that kind of confidence in what your steps are, where you're targeting is the angle that you've taken. You can move a lot cleaner than an athletic guy who doesn't know what he's doing. So that's where I think TJ Bass, and that's why I kind of have prescribed that as a solution for his pass rush issues. Right, is that if you can just get a little bit more help, a little bit of help, not have to move out as far back and forth, and then just have a little bit better pass rush plan. I think the other part of his issue, the reason he plays a lot of belly to belly is obviously his arm length. He does a good job of not like one thing you worry about with guys with short length is the waist bending, right? They're trying to reach to engage in the snap so that they can get hands on you, especially for guys like TJ Bass who are strong, right?
Yes.
He's got really good grip strength. He wants to get his hands on the defender, but he does a really good job of not falling into that trap.
Yes.
Like he does kind of allow defenders to get into him a little bit more. However, the next step of that, I would like to see him start to get his punch out a little bit sooner, a little bit cleaner. If he could time that punch a little bit better, I think you can kind of get the best of both worlds where he's getting to use his strength without having to overreach over his feet in order to kind of reach the defender in time.
So when you were watching him, did you have any comps or any players that just he reminded you of?
I mean, physically, yes. Like he reminded me of. This is a really weird one, and this is a way back machine, and I don't know if people are going to remember this guy. But do you remember the McQuiston brothers?
Pat and Paul
McQuiston?
Yeah.
He reminded me a little bit of the McQuistons, where
I like that one.
He's
Which one did we have? Did we have Pat McQuiston?
We had Pat,
yeah.
Paul
was the better one.
Was the better one, yeah. Pat wasn't bad though. Pat was probably like a who could we compare him to now? Like that's on the Cowboys. I mean, he was just a guy that like kind of just hung around the back end of that offensive
the Matt
line
Farniaks.
That's literally who I was trying to come up with. My brain was Farniak.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Farniak's a great example of a guy that like they drafted late, I think he was like a 6th or 7th round pick, and he just hung around for a really long time because he was a hard worker and he wasn't going to get you killed if you played. I think he's that kind of guy where high floor. He doesn't have a ton of athleticism left to squeeze out of that body, but he can improve some technique a little bit, which could get him a little bit better. But he's probably like a solid player, never going to be a great player.
Yeah. Now I agree. I think like the Matt Farniak, Paul McQuiston is probably like the most realistic outcome here. However, if we're talking about like he reaches like the 99th percentile of outcomes, right? I don't think he's all that different from Alex Kappa when he came out of Humboldt State, who was left tackle in college, moved to guard in the NFL because he was a terrible athlete with 32-inch arms, but he played hard. He was awesome at finishing offensive line or defensive lineman, and just played after the whistle and had a little bit of a mean streak to him. I could see TJ Bass in a zone heavy scheme being something like that, where you just get in there and he grinds and he just plays hard. And yeah, it's never going to be pretty. It's not going to be the teach tape, but he's just a really solid player. The NFL is littered with guys like that.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I won't be surprised to see Bass if he makes it.
Absolutely not. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, if this guy, continues to work the way that, you think he can just based on what he's already gotten out of his body. I think, this is, it's funny how we've managed to go through these kind of prospect pairings and seemingly almost at every turn managed to pair together two prospects who are kind of on the opposite ends of
Yes.
spectrum of where they are in development, right?
Mhm.
Like Bass is a guy who he didn't get drafted, but I would say that has the best opportunity or one of the best opportunities of these down roster to undrafted free
Mhm.
agent guys to potentially make some hay. And if he really had a good training camp, could find his way into the game day roster,
Would
maybe
be
even in
shocked at all.
conversation for a starting spot, some point during the season. If he kind of hits all his, his
Well,
goals.
and the other thing is a lot of times that happens with these guys, and then they just never give up jobs because offensive line coaches, they
Love those
love
kind of
tough
guys.
guys that are
Yeah.
stay on the field and they're going to play to the whistle and after the whistle. Like every team needs a couple players like this. So I won't be surprised at all if that's the career arc for TJ Bass.
And again, like because we haven't really spoken specifically about this, but the play attitude, the
Yes.
play demeanor, those are all top notch with this guy. Like the best that you could want. He loves to finish guys. He loves being physical. He's what you would describe as nasty. Though all those aspects that you want in an interior offensive lineman who maybe isn't quite as athletic as you want him to be, he has those. So he has the look of the type of player who comes in as an undrafted free agent and makes a run at a starting guard position.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the other offensive lineman the Cowboys signed, Earl Bostick Jr., who a lot of people really liked. The Cowboys even gave him quite a bit of money. Now, you were talking about a freak athlete here from Kansas. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see almost 6'6", 309 pounds, ran a 5.05 40-yard dash with a 1.68 10-yard split. That's faster than Michael Mayer, by the way. I mean, just the numbers across the board are absolutely insane. But what did you think of the tape?
Well, so here's the deal, right? Like he is an incredible athlete, but he does not look like he put that weight on correctly. Like
No.
he's 309 pounds. So here's the deal. He ran faster than Michael Mayer. I mean, this guy used to be a tight end, so that doesn't shock
Faster
me.
10-yard split. I should
Yeah,
clarify
faster 10
that.
yard split. Yeah, yes. To be clear, yes. I think that's he looks. I mean, honestly, to me, he looks like one of those guys who uh, that an offensive line coach saw around campus and said, "You're playing offensive line for me. You come here and get in here and do these things." He does not look natural to me. And I think that the real issue I have with his game as it stands right now is that he doesn't have a play. Hasn't developed a play demeanor that you need to play offensive line yet. He's not a finisher. In fact, there are many different snaps where I felt like he did his little bit and then he kind of would stand and watch. I actually thought that watching him was very like you watch 2 snaps of him burying some dude, and then like 3 snaps of him like okay, and then like waiting for the rest of the snap to go through. I just felt like you got really inconsistent tenacity from this guy. It's there. Let me. Having said all that, it's all there. Like, I mean, he's got long arms. He's got the body that you want. He's got. I mean, it looks like all the pieces that you want to develop an offensive lineman are there. But he's 309 pounds, and it's all in his stomach. You know what I'm saying? Like he has like a weird gut. It doesn't look. It looks like he put on weight for putting on weight's sake, as opposed to putting on good weight. So I think that he's ultimately, despite having statistics of an incredible NFL offensive tackle, he's going to need to completely rebuild his body.
Yep.
I think he's going to need to like lose weight and then rebuild it properly. So I think that this guy is someone that you look at the tools, you look at what's there, right? And this is someone that you try to find a way to stash for more than 1 year, because he's not. Yes. I don't even think a year in a training room, even if Terrence Steele was his workout partner and he was coming in every single day,
he's way more raw than what Terrence Steele was coming out of.
And the aspects that concern me that are stuff that he's not going to be able to get in the weight room. You know, like you just feel like you need this guy to have a more physical attitude. Or at least, and I should be clear. I struggle with whether or not this is a tenacity problem or if it's a concentration problem. It could just be a concentration problem. It just seems like there are too many times when I'm seeing inconsistent levels of effort. And I don't think it's a situation where the guy doesn't care or anything like that. I honestly do think it's he loses track of what he's doing in the snap, you know, and there's other things too, like, you know, like he's not a physical player in the sense that he's big and strong, but when he hits you or when he engages with you, he stops moving his feet. Like he's not like trying to run through you or bury you or finish the play. And again, I don't think this is an effort thing or an attitude thing. I think this is a mentality thing that needs to be changed. And I just honestly don't know like how much of that can be changed.
So we should also talk about why why he's so raw coming out of Kansas, despite being there for so many years. But he was there for 6 years, I believe. Yeah, started in 2017. We'll talk about that next. All right, Landon, we were talking about Earl Bostick Jr., a undrafted free agent for the Dallas Cowboys. You mentioned how raw he is as a player. Mm-hmm. We should mention that in high school, he played tight end and he was a defensive end. He went to Kansas the first 3 years of his career. He was a tight end for Kansas, made the switch to offensive line late in the 2019 season, never got on the field. 2020, he played right tackle and then eventually moved over to left tackle. Despite being in school for so long, he only has 32 starts at offensive line, and that includes high school and college. So I think the hope is the more you get him to play and practicing playing left tackle or right tackle, that you'll see some more of the consistency, because the player that we saw at Kansas wasn't good. Like, I'll just give you some numbers. This is courtesy of Pro Football Focus the last year. First percentile run block grade. That's really bad. He was the second worst in the country. Fourth percentile negatively graded plays. Third percentile run block grade on gap runs. Seventh percentile pass block grade on 7-step concepts. Like, he's just not a good player right now. However, you just don't find athletes like this.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, right? Is that these guys it's planet theory, you know, with a lot of this stuff. You mean you just pointed all that out, and he's still on an NFL roster to come work out, right? Mm-hmm. And again, like, that's not just like stats. You see that on tape. I mean, I saw last night there was a gap play where he was pulling across the formation, and I think it was against, was it Mississippi State or something?
Yep.
Yeah, and he hits the edge on a kick out block, and it makes a huge sound, and like the announcers, oh, no. But if you watch the play, he hits the guy who weighs probably 40 pounds less than him, and he moved backwards. Like the guy that was pulling moved backwards, and the defensive end kind of, he didn't make the play, but like it didn't knock him over or even back. So I think that's I think it's hard to teach that, right? It's not even just enough that he needs to rebuild his body. It's that, like, you got to know that you want that dude on the ground in pain. Like, you know what I'm saying?
There's
like
a level of physicality that you either have or you don't, right?
Yeah. And like, you know, I can teach you to be faster and stronger and have better technique, but I can't make you want to run through some guy's face. You know, like, I can't give you Marshawn Lynch syndrome, which is what I need in my guys, right?
Yeah.
So look, what tight end is not exactly a finesse position, and he played defensive end too. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't just a situation where, oh, this is a more physical. I mean, it is a more physical position than what he's used to playing, but he's been doing it for a little while. He's played football for a little while. I have concerns that, you know, you'll be able to get him there athletically, but I don't know, like, but you know what? There's guys like that who play in the league, right?
Yeah.
Who are not necessarily finishers, you know, tough guys, whatever, but because they're just so big and athletic and dancing bears, they can function in the league. So I think it's going to make his journey a little bit more difficult, but I mean, the guy has got physical tools for days to work with.
Let's just be clear on these two players, TJ Bass and Earl Bostick Jr. Bass is just so much more likely to make the 53-man roster this year. He's just so much closer to being an NFL player. But I do think Bostic is going to be somebody who is either on the Cowboys practice squad or bounces around other teams' practice squads because it's a Big 12 offensive lineman with a lot of traits. And those guys they stick around because
they get a shot.
And every offensive line coach believes I can be the one that turns him into an NFL player. So to be honest, I think both of these guys are going to be on the roster. I think there's a chance Bass is on the 53 and Bostic's on the practice squad, but two very, very intriguing offensive linemen here. Any final thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, just to kind of put a bow on that, what we were talking about, like just kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, despite being undrafted free agents. Bass has kind of everything you want in an attitude, in the kind of minimum requirements. I think he's, as ready as he's going to be to play in the NFL. I mean, he definitely has places to go from here. But you think with that kind of attitude, that kind of toughness, that kind of experience, and if he can hide a little bit of his, athletic downsides, you could get a guy who can actually function on an NFL roster, maybe even this season. Bostic's the complete opposite guy. He doesn't have that attitude. He doesn't have that kind of high floor. He's not ready for prime time. But what does he have? He has the kind of elite traits that if you do develop and you do hit on him, this could be with these kind of athletic traits, if you hit on someone like them, you can get a Pro Bowl left tackle. Sure. You can get and that's not even like the only positive goal you could get out of someone like Bostic. I mean, what happens if you just get halfway there and you get him as a solid swing tackle? That would be a fantastic signing as an undrafted free agent a year from now. So that's kind of where these guys are. Is one of them is very high floor with a low ceiling, and one of them is very high ceiling with a very low floor.
TJ Bass beating out Matt Farniak in training camp. See that happening?
It's Doga is that he's going to have to cheat out. The whole left guard depth chart is a fun conversation we should have one day, because at this point there are a lot of names to discuss.
I mean, there are legitimately 4 to 5 different options the Cowboys could roll out there, right? Between Tyler Smith, Terrence Steele, as much as I disagree with that, Matt Farniak, Chuma Doga, TJ Bass. I mean, there's just who knows? And maybe the Cowboys will throw them all against the wall and see what sticks. And
maybe there's an outside guy we haven't even mentioned yet.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Dalton or Reisner, right? Something like that. So keep an eye on Bass, though. I do think he's going to be somebody that's very interesting to watch as we get closer to that final cut down day, because I just think he's going to make it really, really hard to cut him. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Please go check out the YouTube channel where we create content for free every single day. Go follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you guys next time.